Okay, our next guest is an Edgar winning author who is perhaps best known for his #1 New York Times bestselling Joe Pickett series, including the novel Long Range, which came out earlier this year. He's also written several standalone novels and pens his popular Cassie Duel series, which has been adapted for television. CJ Box, welcome to Thriller Talk.
Well, thank you for having me. It's good to see you again, Ryan.
So before we dive in today, I would love to share a little bit of a funny story that connects Chuck and Ryan. As executive director of Thriller Fest, we had a virtual version of it, and it was wonderful because there was people being paired up to interview authors. And I knew what a huge fan Ryan was of Chuck's work. So I reached out to Ryan expecting an incredibly enthusiastic response to my offer. And I'll let Ryan tell his side of it.
Yeah, well, so I mean, anyone that's followed the books by certainly knows that CJ Box is by far my favorite living author. I'm a huge fan. Um, Literally, freak out every time a new book comes out. And I knew when Virtual Thriller Fest was going on, you guys had reached out, Kim, and I said, hey, whatever you need from me, however I can help. And I remember you being very excited saying, Ryan, I got something really big for you. I'm going to put you with Chuck. And you were so excited about it. And I remember sitting there and I was thinking, and I actually said to you, like, who the hell's Chuck? Who's, and you had to come back and say, CJ Box. And I freaked out. I absolutely freaked out. I didn't know he went by Chuck. That was how I found that out. Then it got better because we shot the first sort of, the first video, and it turned out that the ITW person didn't hit record. So we got this email where pretty much I think everyone blamed me to an extent. It was my fault it didn't record, so we had to do it again because everyone knew I wanted to talk to Chuck again. No, so the first email I got from Kim was, "Did you do this?" Like I have any control or know how to do that. But so everyone teased me pretty well, and that was a lot of fun. But yeah, I mean, I don't think I've ever quite lived that one down. Even my kids make fun of me for that story. They do, yeah. Dad,
Well,
you didn't know that was
appreciate all
your favorite author? No, didn't know.
Ryan, I can't tell you how much I appreciate all the kind things that you write and your reviews as well. It's sometimes I know I'm sitting there blushing as I'm reading them, but I absolutely appreciate it. So thank you.
Well, no, you are so welcome, and thank you. You make my job really easy as a book spy because, for better or worse, I'm kind of like out there in a vulnerable position with the author. When I'm giving recommendations, you never know if someone's going to like them. And if they don't like the person's book, that's rough on the author, but they also get mad at me because I didn't recommend a good book. You're about the safest author I can recommend. And it's so funny because I get people that like cozies, mysteries, big time action thrillers, spy thrillers, and I'm like, go read CJ Box, and they're like, that's really not my thing, and I'm like, just read them, you'll love it, I promise. And every single person I've ever recommended that comes back and tells me they read one of the books has loved it. So you make me look like I know what I'm doing. So thank you, and obviously I do it because I am such a fan. So I'm over here looking at my calendar like, they're probably going to put out arcs for the next one pretty soon, and that's always my favorite time of the year. So
well, thank you. Yeah, well, you do make good recommendations. I take them myself. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I think it just shows that Chuck's an incredible storyteller, and that's what people get caught up in with the characterization and the story. So, as Ryan mentioned in the intro, Cassie Duel is headed to the small screen with ABC this fall. And I wondered if you could tell us about the show and your level of involvement with it.
It's called Big Sky. It's based primarily, the first season at least, on the book The Highway, which is by far the creepiest book I've ever written. And it's not called Big Sky, not called The Highway, it's called Big Sky. And David E. Kelley, who's a real well-known executive producer, writer, has had something like 13 or 14 shows on the air, bought the rights to The Highway about, I think, 5 years ago. And then subsequently, he got the rights to all the other Cassie Duel books. And he's been a real, kind of a fan and proponent of this for a long time. He had it originally placed with the Epix Network, and then they had, just like so many of these stories, they had a change in leadership. The new guys weren't as enthusiastic about it. A&E picked it up, And then now ABC last fall, was it? Last spring, made a what they called straight to series order, meaning no pilot, no anything. We're going to put this on, and it's going to be ABC's only new drama. This sounds like a commercial. Tuesdays, November 17th on ABC, Big Sky, and they're shooting right now in Vancouver. They were originally going to shoot in Montana, where the book takes place, but all these COVID-related things that have changed production made it much easier for them to film it in a bubble in Canada, in Vancouver, than it did to film it in Montana. So they're going at it right now. I've been hearing from David Kelly that things are going well, although the weird circumstance of this is that he has not visited the set because he doesn't want to quarantine for 14 days. And I will probably not be able to as well for the same reason. So I'll be watching the show like everybody else when it comes on.
We're all excited.
My involvement, my involvement is I provided the source material. I'm not there on day-to-day. I read the pilot script. I thought it was fantastic. I offered a couple of ideas, which David Kelly thought were good ideas, and he went at it from there. But even in the promos I've been seeing, I'm recognizing the dialogue. So I think that's good.
The cast, which includes Kylie Bunbury, Catherine Winnick, and Ryan Phillippe, they look incredible in the trailers that I've seen online and on TV now. They're starting to come out on TV now. What are your thoughts about the casting, and is there anyone you're especially excited to see slip into character?
Well, the casting is interesting because, you know, as a writer, you envision how people look. And I don't know, you know, how if it's ever going to be the character that you envision exactly. There's certainly some different kind of casting going on with this one, although I think the essence of the characters remain the same. You know, Cassie in the books is a middle-aged, overweight white woman, and Kylie Bunbury is quite attractive black actress. So that's one big change. But I corresponded with her early on. She said she was going to make me proud of how Cassie was portrayed, and I believe her. I think it's going to be really interesting. I think the character, and I'm going to screw up these names. The casting for the Lizard King is right on. I think the Highway Patrolman is right on. I should have a list of everybody. They'd be upset with me if they saw this, but I think it's generally much like the books.
And does the first season follow the Highway then?
Yes. Now, because the other books have been optioned as well, I don't know. I know that there's going to be some secondary plots going on that include some of the threads from the additional Cassie Dual books. You know, TV is so much different than novel writing. I mean, they're still working on the scripts for the, you know, later into the series now as the thing debuts. So it may take some directions that I won't see coming. And there's so much input. It's so collaborative. There's so many people involved. There's probably going to be some changes, but I know that David Kelly at least is good and a professional. And I know he'll keep things pretty much on track, I believe.
Fantastic. So in the novels, Cassie was last seen in the Bitterroots. Are you working on a new Cassie book right now?
Actually, I am not working on a new one yet. I'm going to start working on a new one next year. I was on a book and a half pace for the last 7 or 8 years, and it got to be almost overwhelming because I do everything myself. I don't have researchers. I don't have assistants. I don't have anybody. It's just me. And the book and a half pace was really getting grinding because I love to fish and I love to hunt and I love to do things. So I was able to kind of put off that Cassie book for a year with publisher Macmillan. And then, so it'll be every 2 years as opposed to every other year.
Fantastic. And do you think Cassie and Joe might meet up in a book?
I don't know how that could happen, mainly because I have the unique and weird situation of having 2 different publishers. The Joe Pickett books are Penguin Putnam, the Cassie Duell books, and the standalones are all with Macmillan. So I don't know who owns the characters between those two. I've thought a little bit about it, and I've thought about some of the carryover or how I could do it, but I'm just not sure how it would work technically.
That reminds me of Michael Connelly's Bosch situation with the Amazon show.
Me too.
Titus Welliver playing Bosch, and then they had Matthew McConaughey as Mickey Haller and the Lincoln Lawyer. Would have been great. I think fans wanted to see them together so bad, and they couldn't do it, which is a real shame. Yeah.
Chuck, it's.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes. No, I was just going to say I agree with you. I'm a big fan of Michael Connelly and Bosch and his involvement with the show, and how I love the way that they've done it, in that they've stuck with the books, but they've actually incorporated sometimes 2 or 3 of the novels, as you know, into the same season. And I think that's just a great way to do long form television, and that's I believe how it's going to be done with the Cassie Duell series.
Yeah, I agree. That show is. I'm sad it's ending. That's the truth. But all right,
Me
we
too.
talked about Joe Pickett a little bit. There was a few years ago. You sold the rights for a Joe Pickett television show. Then you put out a statement saying that essentially that was canceled. You might have bought the rights back. I'm not exactly sure how it went down, but it was not meant to be. And you gave your reasoning on that, which I think fans. I'll speak for your fans, being probably one of your biggest fans. We were thrilled. Basically, the reasoning was they weren't going to make the show much like the books, which I don't think any of us have an interest in seeing if it's not the Joe Pickett we know and love on the page coming to life on the small or big screen. That said, do you think it's possible we might one day see an adaptation of the Joe Pickett series?
I know it's possible. I can't make the official announcement because I promised not to. But this winter, there will be an announcement that the Joe Pickett show will go into production next spring. Can't talk networks, can't talk anything, but the people who are involved have been involved now for 4 years. I met the writers. I went to the writers' room just before March when everything shut down. And I loved the way they were doing it, the way they thought about it, the way they thought about the characters. They all understood it was a show about a family as opposed to just simply action and bad guys and police procedural. So from that, starting with that premise, I'm very excited that it might come about like we had hoped it would.
So you mentioned that you're an avid fisherman, hunter, and outdoorsman. And so I believe you and your wife were involved in the tourism industry before. If someone was to come to Wyoming and they were looking for some adventure, what things would you recommend they do or see?
Oh, I could recommend a lot of things. It would really depend on what their level of comfort is. Everyone should go to Yellowstone Park, the first national park. And whether or not they go off trail, off road, it is truly one of the most magnificent places on earth. I think I've been there now 150 times, mainly because of my tourism background and taking people there. But I'm still always amazed. And I've been to not every inch of it by any means, but most of it. And you know, once you get off the road, off the trails, it's still as wild as it ever was, and that you can make it as wild as you want. But the state is big. There's a lot of stuff to do. Terrain, it really varied from, you know, sand dunes to almost Pacific Northwest type, rainy, very green areas. So I write about it. That's why I move the books around so much, where Joe Pickett can show up, you know, in the Red Desert or in Jackson Hole or whatever, because I think it is a very fascinating kind of state with the smallest population in the country.
And if they were looking, sorry, Red, if they were looking for complete and utter adventure, though, the wildest thing possible.
Oh, I would say probably get involved with like a multi-day horseback trip into the Bridger Wilderness or the Tetons or Yellowstone. That's really pretty basic stuff. I've done that a few times. That's really, you know, hearkening back. This is, you know, the most remote area in the United States is not that far from Jackson and Yellowstone. It's called the Thoroughfare region. And I've been in there on horses, and it's just like, you know, probably as it was in 1820 or before.
I would just add that for anyone like me who's intimidated to actually go to Yellowstone, you can certainly read about it in Free Fire. Free Fire is one of my favorite Joe Pickett books, and it probably has one of my favorite setups that you've done before, which is there's a little area where essentially someone could get away with murder because it's not
Hmm.
yeah, well, I don't want to spoil the book at all, but so if you again like me are intimidated by the outdoors, but you like reading about it, Free Fire is definitely a go-to of mine, and the setup there is fantastic. Chuck, you've won a lot of awards from the two most prestigious Western culture organizations in existence. What is it about the American West that appeals to you and readers and seems to be so timeless?
Well, I think it's like every country, every culture has some kind of backstory and mythology. England, the Knights of the Round Table, that kind of thing, is what you think about. And I think in the United States, the American frontier and the West are what gives a lot of Americans kind of a background, kind of a place to come from. And I think because of Western books and Western movies, a lot of the world thinks that there is a real unique kind of culture and outlook and terrain in the American West. I agree with all of those things. I grew up here. And because, as Kim mentioned, because of the work I used to do in tourism, international tourism, found out there was this, a real fascination with the American West overseas, and I think to some degree on both coasts. So what I try to do is just portray that culture as naturally as I can, as authentically as I can, recognizing that it is pretty exotic. The wild stuff, the culture, the gun culture, hunting, fishing, it is a unique kind of landscape and unique kind of tableau to paint on, without trying to be too cliched. Where everybody talks real slow and says they got to go down the road a piece, which nobody talks like, but also include modern day issues and controversies like energy production and, the environment. I try to keep those things in all of the books so it's current and not just a retelling of Westerns.
That's fabulous. You touched on the word family earlier, and I think so many people relate to that because we're all obviously embroiled in our own families, functional, dysfunctional. Was that a conscious choice for you when you started the Joe Pickett series to develop a large family that can, kind of evolve over time, or was it just did you somehow fall into that as you wrote?
I kind of fell into it, Kim. I never started to write a series. I think that's kind of a mistake sometimes with some fledgling authors, that they plan the first 10 books and therefore they're withholding things because it's going to be revealed later. The very first book, which came out as open season, I called Joe Pickett. In my mind, it was a standalone about an environmental issue, the Endangered Species Act, and the protagonist was a game warden because the protagonist was the best kind of game warden. A game warden was the best kind of protagonist I could come with to advance the story. Not until I had a contract with the publisher for 2 more Joe Pickett books did I ever start thinking of a series. I mean, I never thought, the world is just waiting for a Wyoming game warden series, and I'm the guy who can deliver it. So it happened organically, but luckily, I tried to avoid some types in that very first book. I didn't want Joe Pickett to be a lone kind of, PI with a dark past and a lot of baggage. I thought it was more realistic if he, like most game wardens, lived in his house with his family, and they were all somewhat involved. And he didn't make much money, and he never probably would doing that. So I just thought it added to the realism to make him a little bit more relatable, and he screws up sometimes too. So it was all just kind of a way to make it authentic in the first thing. But I'm glad that I started with that premise now.
And when they asked you, can you write a few more Joe Pickett books? What was your initial reaction?
Oh, my first reaction was, yes, absolutely. And then my second reaction was, I don't know what the second one is going to be. But luckily, at that time, I wasn't a spring chicken. And I had written a couple of manuscripts previous to the Joe Pickett book that didn't include Joe Pickett, but that had plot elements in it that I could kind of steal from. So the first couple of books were rewritten other books that didn't have Joe Pickett. And then I kind of got into the rhythm of it.
That's fascinating. I'm going to show what a Joe Pickett nerd I am. You mentioned the energy stuff. That's Cold Wind. So anyone that has not read the series, get Cold Wind, and you'll see about that one. You touched on some of this a little bit, Chuck, but Joe he's a really refreshing and unusual hero. I feel like if you walked in and pitched him to a publisher or a reader or an agent, they would not get it at all, because he's the anti-James Bond or Mitch Rapp or Jason Bourne. He's a lousy shot with his handgun. He's this happily married guy, so you're not going to have the steamy hookups and all that. And he's quiet and unassuming, almost to a fault. Do you feel like those features are part of what makes him so appealing to readers?
Well, I think so, Ryan. And again, not intentionally, not strategically, but that's one of the great things about being able to on book tours and meeting readers is to get that immediate feedback from people. And, one very unusual thing about the books, and I was telling my publishers this for years, was that at book signings, it was almost always a breakdown of 50-50 men and women. As you know, most thrillers are read by men. Most mysteries are read by women. Sometimes, the ratios are like 90% to 10% on either one. And for some reason, my books seem to appeal to both genders and old and young. And I think that's because of the family aspect and because readers read it in different ways. For a lot of women that I talk to, they talk about the family exclusively as the book in the books. Men like the action and Nate Romanowski's Great Big Pistol, that kind of thing. So it was never strategic, but it has worked out that I think because of different elements of the book, they appeal to different people.
And I think he's relatable. That's the other thing. I'm a big Vince Flynn fan. I love Mitch Rapp, but there's a book where Mitch Rapp kills 15 guys in one scene. I couldn't do that. I'm pretty positive I couldn't do that, but I could go miss a guy shooting at him. I could probably miss. I could do a lot of the stuff Joe Pickett does. I identify with driving my kids around and them hating the music I listen to and me equally hating the music that they put on. I think that it's you relate to that and you see yourself to some extent. Even as someone like me who's never been out in the country or outdoorsy, I didn't know what a game warden was when I read Open Season. I actually had to look that up. And yet there's so many things in the character and the family life and his normal everyday job situation that I think we see in ourselves. I think that's what makes it relatable. And I think that I can speak to me, and I'm sure Kim has her own feelings, but I think that's why he's relatable and people love him.
Hopefully so. Thank you.
Yeah, I think also when they're flawed characters, you can really bond with them. I think what happens is sometimes if the character is too perfect, like Ryan said, that unstoppable, you don't really worry about them. And in Joe Pickett's case, I think you really care and you can see the vulnerabilities there. And I think that's what really, makes us very attached to him as a character. So,
and some big and important characters have died, been killed or gone away. And I think I always want to keep that on the table, and that so readers know that, not everybody is safe all the time. Things are going to happen. And I think that adds to the tension.
It's like George R.R. Martin light in a few ways. It's not quite as bad as Game of Thrones. And there's some characters in the genre, they're just bulletproof. And Joe is definitely not bulletproof, as we've seen across the series. But no spoilers, obviously. But there's been a lot of characters who have been done away with. So
it wasn't a Joe Pickett book, but in the book The Highway, that shocked an awful lot of readers, thinking that the protagonist of that series was on for a long run, and halfway through the book he's gone. I still hear about that from angry readers at times.
Well, if there's any big weddings like the Red Wedding and such, then we'll be really worried.
Yes, that's a good point. Yeah, Joe Pickett has 3 daughters. Yes.
So in the wedding, maybe that's a story idea. So before we let you go, Chuck, we'd love to hear about Dark Sky, which is the 21st Joe Pickett book coming out next March. What can you tell us about that?
Strangely enough, it's very much a COVID book without being a COVID book. Primarily because I wanted to write a book where I really stripped Joe Pickett down to the very, very essence. Without it's a wilderness story, without guns, without communications equipment, very, very isolated. The book was begun before March, but then it was finished over the next 3 months. So I'm so far ahead of schedule, it's ridiculous. But I think that sense of isolation and kind of chaos on a real personal level comes through. And like I said, I got done with it much, much earlier than usual. I just did the copy edit on it, and I love this book. Some people may not, because it's just so intense and personal. But that's due to come out next March as well.
That's exciting. I'm really looking forward to it. And when will the arcs be ready?
I don't know. I'm guessing that they should be ready. Like I said, I just did the copy edit. So there's no good reason why they won't be ready within the next month or so. But everything's slow, especially when it comes to printing now. So I don't know if that will delay that or not. But we'll see, hopefully soon.
Ryan will be checking his mailbox.
You have no idea. I'm calling every friend I have at Penguin when we're done. No, soon probably, but yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of us excited for that one.
Yeah, they all know you pretty well. There is a high-tech aspect to it, but it's much different than anything else I've written. Can I say one thing about the TV shows that I didn't get into?
Yeah.
From my standpoint and my wife's, and we're just kind of like not doing the first Joe Pickett thing. Entertainment is so much different than it used to be. It's not the panacea for an author to get a television show or a movie like it once was, because the dollars aren't the same as they once were. There's so many networks, so many series, all that. I think all an author can hope for is that the books serve as the shows serve as commercials for the books and create a little bit more exposure. And that's what I'm excited about, is that we've already seen sales go up on the books just from the promos of the television show. So that's where the real reward is. So thanks for letting me say that.
Of course. Well, thank you very much for coming on today, Chuck. Such a pleasure. And, wish you well and hope things go as well in Wyoming as well.
Thank you very much. Same to you.
Thanks, Chuck. We appreciate
Ryan,
you.
hang in there. Oh, my pleasure. Let's do it again sometime.